Welcome to Overcoming the Challenges of Slow-Moving Inventory and Undervalued Assets. Our facilitator is Jay Dwivedi. He's a sought-after business strategist with over 25 years of experience advising Fortune 500 companies. Jay, it's great to have you back.
Jim, it's great to talk to you too.
So I'm intrigued by theme number 5, case studies on implementation of multi-stakeholder approach. What are you seeking to learn here?
Gene, as we discussed briefly during our last conversation, the suggestion for this theme actually was based on a conclusion in one of the previous themes around how multi-stakeholder engagement could be a powerful tool in eliminating or alleviating the problem of slow-moving inventory. So in this theme, our focus was to reach out to the experts and ask them to identify real-world examples, case studies, stories of how this was done either by them or their employer and so on, and what were the results achieved.
Well, I was really impressed with this group of panelists that you put together. So let's find out what you learned from your executive summary. I'm really caught up in a couple of things here, but tell us what we're going to learn.
Gene, you're exactly right, that this was a great discussion. The panelists did a tremendous job. And when someone goes to the complete transcript of this theme, they'll be able to review the rich discussion and many compelling stories of how companies are realizing that they must do this, the whole multi-stakeholder engagement exercise, and some of them are doing it. So what I walked away with was that if you want to do it at your organization, there are now technologies that can make it easier to implement a program like that, particularly when you have global supply chains. And you know how complex it is when your vendors are in Asia and you have marketing people maybe in India and you have, web people somewhere else and you have the decision makers here in the U.S. But what the panelists also tried to warn us that technology alone will not make it happen. So the experts are emphasizing that in order for this to work effectively, number one, the top leadership should drive this. Number two, they should communicate it clearly and really explain to all the employees why this is being done. Number three, and you and I know this really well, that if you don't have an org design that encourages this and fosters a supportive environment, nothing will work. That's why the experts are suggesting that some org changes need to be made so that there are no more silos left in the company. And finally, number 4 point, and this is really important, it came in many different ways during the discussion, is that nobody should be penalized for coming up with bad news. You and I know this is how many organizations work these days. But in this new approach, which is based around collaboration, which is based around multi-stakeholder engagement so that they can learn about bad events as soon as they happen and then respond to them collaboratively, we have to encourage an environment in which if the sales are not happening as per the forecast, the managers do not have to downplay it or keep talking about how things will change in the future. On the other hand, they are encouraged to report the bad news as soon as possible and then work with their colleagues so that something can be done. And that's why the final point the panelists talk about is that your reward and recognition systems must also reflect these changes.
That's just so good, so good. Let's jump into key point number 1 then, because in multiple case studies that were cited here, they've listed approaches that were based on strategic planning, their communication, and assessment. This keeps coming up, communication, right? And then rewards, which is complicated when you've got multiple stakeholders, right?
You're exactly right. And I think it's very important to understand that many of the Fortune 500 companies, even some of the mid-sized organizations, they now have global supply chains, and they could, not just be buying from China, they could be buying from Vietnam and Mexico and Canada and parts of the United States and so on. So when you have your workforce scattered everywhere, it's really important that information flows seamlessly. And that is why the panel members have been hammering this point around communication. And you can see that, Sumant talked about a whole different org structure, the DMO structure that he mentions, which is designed to bring decision makers together so that they can collaborate using technology, using, lines of communication and respond fast. Lisa is talking about the importance of, yet again, staying very focused on what the data is telling us about what is happening at the customer level, and then tweaking everything else to match that, advertising, promotions, marketing efforts, manufacturing, and so on. And then finally, Deborah makes a great point that this whole process, it has to be, I really like the word ongoing that she used, that this is an ongoing exercise for each location. So this is something that you cannot do it one time and just wait and see how things will turn out. No, it is something that you have to be doing all the time.
In key point number 2, you also highlighted some of the benefits of collaboration. Talk about this.
Yes, and this was a great suggestion from the sponsor that, we want to know how companies are doing this, but it's also important to see, what was the output? Did it succeed? And if so, what was achieved? Because a lot of time there are good ideas out there, but you don't always know if they were successful. So as we analyzed the multi-stakeholder engagement process, we came up with several stories, and we can't capture all of them here. They are in the transcript. But as you can see here, that companies have realized savings into hundreds of thousands of dollars. Some data is around, what kind of percentage savings were achieved. But it looks like by involving all the decision makers, by having the same information in front of all the department heads, if they can then use this to drive decision making on the inventory side, companies can really make a difference in how they are able to address the problem of slow-moving inventory and undervalued assets.
That's great. Wow, this was so good. These 3 people obviously contributed greatly to the panel, and we really appreciate their efforts. Let's talk about where the conversation's going next. What's coming up in theme number 6, Jay?
Gene, the next theme that we are in the process of finalizing is yet another interesting one, though we are transitioning to approaching this problem from a slightly different angle. Now, our sponsor wants to get feedback from the experts on a concept called corporate trade. And briefly, what it is that this is a program under which if a firm has slow-moving inventory or undervalued assets, there are specialized firms out there. They'll go in at this firm and say, okay, we'll purchase the stock from you at book value, and then offer them some form of trade credits in return. And they can then use these credits to fund other costs within the business. For example, if something is not selling, maybe they can use these funds to increase their advertising spend. And that, helps them to prevent a write-down on the value of the stock on the balance sheet. And it also frees up, their shelf and warehouse space for stocking them with products that are actually selling. So our goal in this theme is going to be to find out, what experts think about this approach. Have they seen it in operation at companies that they work for or their clients? And again, get some of the real-world examples of how this is operating.
That sounds fantastic. I can't wait for that. Great job. Jay Dwivedi, a sought-after business strategist with over 25 years of experience advising Fortune 500 companies. And Jay, we will talk again.
Yes, we will. Thank you, Gene.